Welcome to another episode of In Search of Santa Cruz. Today we are going in search of the auto tree. Of the many state parks in California, Big Basin is the oldest. Created in 1901, Big Basin preserves one of the finest groves of old-growth redwoods in central California. A few feet north of the park headquarters stands an exceptionally large redwood with a tall fire scar on its south side. The tree is not presently identified, nor is it on maps of park attractions, but for much of the 20th century, this tree was known as the auto tree. In the late 1800s, entrepreneurs began searching for ways to exploit California's giant redwoods as tourist attractions. One rather impressive but destructive method was to cut a hole in a tree through which a wagon, stagecoach, or later an automobile could pass. The first redwood to be tunneled was in 1874. It was a giant sequoia in Tuolumne County. This tree, actually just the lower part of a dead tree, still stands. Later, other trees were tunneled. Some were coast redwoods: the Coolidge tree, the chandelier tree, and the twin drive-thru trees in Mendocino County, and the shrine tree in Humboldt County. Several giant sequoias were also tunneled: the pioneer cabin tree in Calaveras County, the California tree in Mariposa County, and the most famous of all the drive-thru trees, the giant Wawona tree, also in Mariposa County. Besides drive-thru trees, there were also drive-under trees, walk-through trees, drive-through stumps, drive-by trees, and garage trees. Many of the drive-thru trees began as goose-pen trees. These are redwoods with a large, hollowed-out fire scar. The term goose-pen tree dates back to the 1800s, when such naturally occurring hollows were sometimes fenced and used as pens for geese or other small domestic animals. Redwood bark is resistant to fire, but if a fallen log or other debris is beside a tree, the fire can get hot enough to burn through the bark and outer growth layer of the wood. The tree tries to heal the wound, but successive fires over hundreds of years can enlarge the scar, forming a goose pen. Selecting a tree that was already partly hollow saved the woodcutters time, but tunneling was not very good for the health of the tree and increased the likelihood that it might someday topple. Indeed, that is exactly what happened to the Wawona tree in 1969, 88 years after it was tunneled. The Coolidge tree is also no longer standing. Big Basin's auto tree was never a drive-thru tree. The cars in the old photographs had simply been parked in the goose pen. One can think of it as a garage tree, an eco-friendly answer to the drive-thru trees. The auto tree is especially important historically. It was here that members of the Sempervirens Club posed for a photograph in May 1900 to illustrate the grandeur of Big Basin's redwoods. The group hatched plans to preserve the magnificent grove as a park. A year later, in 1901, their lobbying paid off, and the Governor of California signed the bill for what became California Redwood Park, today known as Big Basin. The auto tree can easily be recognized in old photographs by the pattern of ridges and grooves in its bark, which, like a fingerprint, is unique for each tree. In the early to middle 1900s, the auto tree was one of 40 named trees in Big Basin. There was the animal tree, the chimney tree, the wigwam tree, the Santa Clara tree, and the cathedral group, among others. Only a few of the old names have persisted, such as the father of the forest and the mother of the forest. Today, visitors are encouraged to learn about the natural features of redwoods and their importance to other plants and to wildlife. Although transportation methods have changed, the auto tree has remained much the same. The practice of letting people pose with their car for pictures seems to have ended in the 1940s. Today, the once famous tree goes unnoticed by the majority of park visitors. But those who pause to gaze upon this giant cannot help but find beauty and inspiration, just as members of the Sempervirens Club did over a century ago.